Hey everybody, welcome to episode 2 of Cincinnati Reds Minor League Talk. I'm Doug, that's Courage. And we're at the midway point of the minor league baseball season, pretty much. Daytona's got a few games left in the first half, but we're pretty much kind of right there in the middle, so we thought that the first topic that we would tackle today would be to kind of discuss how things played out in the first half for the various teams throughout the system. We'll start off at the top with the Louisville Bats. The 36 and 35 as things stand right now, kind of hovering around 500. There's been some good things, some bad things. The roster's kind of been in flux a lot with the way that the Reds' big league roster has also been in flux with all of the injuries that they've had. So I think it's been a good job that manager Delino DeShields has done, kind of mixing and matching, 60 different players that have been on the roster this season. How are things looking down in Pensacola, Courage?
Well, Pensacola did something they haven't been able to do in 5 years as a Reds affiliate, and that's win the first half. Actually, just put a bow on it in the very last game of the first half, finished 41-29. Now a combined 79-61 in their last 140 games of the 4 seasons worth, with the last 2 South Division titles. But really a good squad and the most impactful, I guess, moving forward for the Reds in terms of where all the trade acquisitions land. So you have Tony Renda there, Eric Chigalo, Brandon Dixon on the infield and outfield, and then Rookie Davis on the mound. And we can talk about all those guys here in just a second. But until then, how about Daytona?
Like the other two teams, they're above 500. Right now they're sitting at 35 and 33. They did not qualify for the playoffs in the first half. So they'll be looking to kind of get things rolling in the second half. But they started off really slow, and they really kind of battled their way back to get over 500 over the last month or so. For a while there, they were pretty far back, and they played really well over the last 5 or 6 weeks. And it's one of those things where they got off to that slow start, and they could have folded up and just kind of wrote things off. But they fought through the adversity, and the pitching was really, really strong once again for them in the first half. And in the Florida State League, not too many guys hit. And I think that's kind of something we see if we look at the stats for the team as a whole, is that not too many guys did perform well at the plate. But, in that league, you're not going to see too many outstanding performances from the hitters. And then we've got the Dayton Dragons who, well, I'll let you tell us a little bit about how their first half went.
Well, the good news is that, in the first and second half split season, you really don't have to worry after that midpoint in June about what you did the last 70 games. And for Dayton, it's just getting those out of mind as quickly as possible. 20-49 as they get into the stretch, but showing some signs of life in their last few games. 6 wins in their last 11 games. Pitching has been a strength there. One of 3 no-hit efforts, I believe. How about that for the system? No-hitters in Pensacola for Jackson Stevens and others. Tyler Malley, complete game effort not too long ago. And then Franderlin Romero with a no-hit effort as well before he went over to Baltimore. But Daytona and Dayton, lower levels, less concerned, but a few big pieces there. Tyler Stevenson hitting 196 and a few injuries to be concerned about. But, there is a misconception we were discussing not too long ago, that people see the bad record. They see 29 games below 500 in Dayton, and they equate that with a bad draft from a year ago, because most of these guys, young kids, were 2015 draft picks, 2014 draft picks, and in their first case of professional baseball. But I really don't agree with that premise, and I think you could articulate it a little better than I could.
Yeah, I think that part of the reason is, there's a lot of guys that are on this team that, they probably just weren't ready for this level yet. I think that the Dragons caught a bad break with, getting Tyler Stevenson, who everybody expected to perform better than he had. But, as you mentioned, he battled through injuries. He doesn't have too much playing time. He probably wasn't expected to be, the offensive leader, but he certainly was expected to be better offensively than he has been. And I think the injuries just kind of came into play there. And, they just really haven't gotten things going. I think that, there's pretty much one guy that's kind of carried the offense so far this season, but we'll jump into that with the second question we've got here, who we're going to look at one player from each roster that really stood out. So why don't you go ahead and start off with the guy that's in Dayton that really stood out offensively for the Dragons?
Well, Dayton, Shed Long was the best fourth-season performer. Kevin Franklin, if you wanted to split hairs, did a little better, but that's a 5-game sample. Shed Long was able to hold a 276 average through 66 games, 64 hits to pace the Dragons as well. And this is a very promising bat in a system that isn't light on them, but, it's really a lot. There's a fine line between Jesse Winker and the rest of them. Shed Long isn't too far behind that line, putting up good numbers in a stingy Midwest league where it's hard to get any offensive production going. So he's a guy to watch for moving into the second half, and the player the Dragons are leaning on to get out of their last place spot from the first few months of the year. How about Daytona?
Well, you kind of mentioned him a little bit earlier. We're going to go with the pitcher from this roster, Tyler Malley, who was just promoted today to Double-A Pensacola. He started 13 games, had a 2.50 ERA, 76 strikeouts, 17 walks. Arguably one of the most polished pitchers in the farm system. Might even be the top guy at this point, with Cody Reed being promoted to the Reds. The guy just pounds the strike zone all day long. He hardly ever walks anybody. He's got good but not great stuff, but he's a very advanced pitcher. Throws 4 pitches for strikes, and he can throw pretty much all of them whenever he wants to. It'll be interesting to see how he adjusts to the Double-A level, where he'll face more advanced hitters. Maybe he'll have to learn something a little bit differently on how to attack those guys than he's been able to get away with in the lower levels. But he's definitely the guy that stood out from that roster.
And especially with Malley, I heard a Mike Leake comparison over from Baseball America.
I don't think he's nearly as athletic as Mike Leake was, but when it comes to his stuff and how he uses it, I think they're similar enough. That's a comp that you've heard for a while. I think that it goes back to the fact that both guys have 4 pitches that they can throw for strikes a lot. Similar velocity, although Mike Leake's not throwing quite as hard as Tyler Malley is. So that's definitely I guess. Malley doesn't have the same kind of movement on his fastball, but he's got more velocity than Leake does. And I think that's really kind of where the comp gets a little bit askew. Mike Leake, he worked the bottom of the zone with a moving fastball, going to get more ground balls than Tyler Malley is. But I don't know. I like both of those guys a lot. Definitely not your fireballing pitchers, but guys who have plenty of stuff, and they use it very well. Looking up at Double-A Pensacola, was there somebody who really stood out on that roster?
Well, I think Tony Renda really flew under the radar in the Chapman trade. Everyone was focusing on Rookie Davis. But Renda has a very, very good resume. Carolina League batting champion a few years ago, stint in the Arizona Fall League, and then here in his second full season of Double-A, leading Pensacola with a 326 average. But that's not the whole story. Since May 27, in 22 games, 20 games with hits, 12 multi-hit efforts, and a 413 average in his last 22 games, third best in all of minor league baseball. This guy just hits and hits, and more importantly, they use him. Really, here's a funny story. The reason he missed the first ballot of the Southern League All-Star roster is because managers, GMs, and broadcasters voting for him had him both in utility infielder and the utility outfielder category. He didn't win out in either one. But he's played in left field, second base. Just wherever you tell him to play, he'll play, and he'll hit as well. And then Nick Rout, you were saying not maybe a week ago, but he could be the best pitcher in the Red system this year. 23 outings, he's given up only runs in 3 innings of the 37 he's pitched. 8 walks, 36 strikeouts, that's about a strikeout an inning, and just called up to AAA Louisville. 3 pitches from an advanced college product, Mississippi State. Very fun to watch, and he picked the right year to be a dominant left-handed reliever when Cincinnati is in need of so many arms in this rebuilding effort.
Yeah, gonna look at the Louisville bats. The guy that's really stood out the most is a guy who hasn't even been with the team for pretty much half of the season so far. But Scott Schebler, since he's gone down from the Reds, he's torn the cover off the ball for the bats. He's only played in 39 games, but he leads the team in home runs with 7. He's hitting .309, and he's slugging .566. When the Reds sent him down, one of the things that he had said is that he was looking forward to playing every day. He wasn't used to playing sporadically, and it kind of affected how he was performing at the big league level. And it seems like he was right. Since he's gone down to AAA, he's absolutely crushed the ball while getting playing time every day. It'll be interesting to see if the Reds move Jay Bruce as we get closer to the trade deadline, if they call up Shebler and throw him into an everyday kind of role. But it seems that he's really taken that opportunity to play every day and really gotten the most out of it.
Yeah, and I think he's probably the most likely candidate in that scenario. We'll keep an eye on Jesse Winker, of course, on the DL now with a right wrist injury, the same wrist he injured in Pensacola 2 years back. But, with Winker out of the equation, more than likely it's Shebler. It could be as soon as a month, depending on how the Reds move and when they get the package.
We'll close out the show today with looking at 2 prospects. We'll each pick 2 guys who kind of had struggles in the first half and could really use a good second half to kind of get back into things.
All right, let's start out with Eric Zagailo, one of the trade acquisitions from New York in the Aroldis Chapman deal. Working one of the highest strikeout rates of his career for the first half, 30.4% of his plate appearances ending in strike 3. But picked up the offensive output a little bit in his last few games. .270 average in his last 20 games, on base clip of .370, slugging .397. This is a guy who just generates a ton of bat speed when he can hit the ball. Ball gets out in a hurry. He just hasn't been able to do it so much in the first half. Got over the Mendoza line to close out the first 70-game stretch for Pensacola. We'll keep an eye on him as the season continues. And then Alex Blandino, kind of in that same Scott Shebler profile. Late start to the season after an injury in the World Baseball Classic. Hard to get playing time when Brandon Dixon earned it with a fantastic week of baseball in the end of May, and hitting just 190 in the 190 zone here. So another guy that the Reds are leaning on here in the rebuild. They'll look at him at second base moving forward in the long term. Could be a middle infielder. Third base also in his repertoire from Stanford. But Zagailo and Blandino, 2 guys both from Pensacola to keep an eye on in the second half. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that you picked, 2 position guys, because I wanted to look at 2 pitchers. The 2011 and 2012 first-round picks for the Reds. Robert Stevenson went in 2011. The Reds are really counting on him in their rebuild. I think he's been one of their top prospects that they've kind of tried to sell as being one of the next guys to come up. But he's really struggled to throw strikes this season for AAA. He performed well in 2 starts at the big league level, but he's really struggled to consistently find the strike zone in AAA. That's kind of been his biggest issue over the past few seasons. And if he's not going to be able to throw enough strikes, he's not going to be the kind of starter that the Reds are hoping that he's going to be. The same thing can be said for Nick Travieso. This year is really the first year he's ever really struggled with his control. I know he had a groin injury earlier in the season, and when he came back, first few starts he struggled with his control, and you thought, maybe he's just kind of trying to get back into things, but he's walking 5.1 batters per 9 innings pitched so far this season, and he's got 62 innings under his belt now. It's not as big of a concern given that he's never really had this problem in the past, but he's definitely going to have to bring that rate down. On the flip side, he is showing the highest strikeout rate of his career as well. So that's good to see. But he's definitely going to have to bring down the walk rate in the second half to kind of get back where he was as far as his prospect status goes.
Yeah, absolutely. He's put 2 very good starts together for Pensacola here to close out the half. Actually completed the loop for the Wahoos, the opening day starter, and then getting the ball again on Game 70, a elimination game such as it was for the playoffs. Won his decision. Pensacola won the game, and should be a big part of that rotation moving forward, with Malley joining them just today.
Yeah, I'm actually looking at Travieso's game logs right now, and he's only walked less than 2 batters in 1 start this season. He didn't walk anybody against Birmingham at the end of May. But every other start, he's walked at least 2 batters. So, as you noted, he's had 2 really good starts in a row. He's only walked 2 batters in each of those that went 6 innings. Hopefully that's a sign of things to come. The stuff is definitely there for him, but like Stevenson, he's just going to have to throw more strikes. But that's all we've got for today, guys. Thanks for stopping in. If you're not subscribing to us here on YouTube, hit the red button. We're going to be doing this at least once a week, and we're going to have prospect videos of game action. Hopefully we can get some interviews as things go along. If you're watching us on the website, head over to YouTube and subscribe. You'll get quick alerts whenever we publish any of these videos. And until next week, see ya.